What's that?
That was probably a week ago now. A woman, an elderly woman, entered the Prince of Wales with crosses, garlic, etc., saying she was looking for the Highgate vampire and wanted David Farrant to help her search.
Yes?
Stakes the lot she had.
It seems though that for up-to-date, wild, weird happenings then, Highgate is the place to go to. It's apparently riddled with ghosts, ghouls and vampires. You may think you've got to be bats to believe in vampires, but when we read the stories of 7-foot-high, legless ghosts and vampires on the Ham and High Express, then, as Kenneth Robinson would say, we just had to send Sandra Harris to find out.
Just 5 weeks ago, on Friday, February the 6th, a letter appeared in a local Highgate newspaper telling of strange goings-on in the cemetery here. A ghostly apparition was described by a young man called David Farrant. A ghostly apparition that he says he saw wandering carelessly about, just near the top gate. What was it?
Well, it certainly wasn't human. It was about 7 feet tall and a very dark grey shape. And I looked at it, and after I looked at it, it just glided off the path.
Was it in the shape of a human being?
It was in the shape of a human, yes.
Did you get any feeling from it? Did you feel that it was evil?
Yes, I did feel it was evil. Because the last time I actually saw its face, and it looked like it had been dead for a long time.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that it certainly wasn't human.
There's nothing like a ghost for stirring things up.
Someone who contributed more than anyone else to the taut relationship between cemetery officials and the vampire investigation was a curious individual who sometimes used the name Alan Farrow, but whose real name was David Farrant. Few amateur vampire hunters were less qualified than Farrant, and none caused more trouble. Farrant was so much an amateur as to be comic, but his dabblings in things which he did not understand was to have a tragic outcome.
He armed himself with a cross and stake and crouched between the tombstones waiting. But that night, police on the prowl for vandals discovered him. He was charged with being in an enclosed space for an unlawful purpose, but later the Clerkenwell magistrate acquitted him. Now, in spite of all attempts by the cemetery owners to bar him, Farrant and his friends still maintain a regular vigil around the catacombs in hope of sighting either the vampire or a meeting of Satanists.
We have been keeping watch in the cemetery since my court case ended, and we have still found the signs of their ceremonies here.
Have you ever seen this vampire?
I have seen it, yes. I saw it last February, and I saw it on 2 occasions.
What was it like?
It took the form of a tall, grey figure, about 8 feet tall, and it seemed to glide off the path without making any noise.
You were born David Farrant. Is that right?
Yeah.
On January the 23rd, 1946.
Correct.
Shepherd's Hill Highgate was first home.
Yeah.
Hendon Prep, first school.
Yes.
And is that correct? Hendon Prep?
Yes.
But not for long. were you expelled at the age of 11?
Yes.
And sent to a boarding school?
Yes.
This was Hawkhurst Court in Sussex.
Yes.
Which you disliked intensely and ran away from twice.
Yes.
Before being sent to a private school, Thornlow in Weymouth.
Yes.
At the the age of 13.
Yes.
You didn't take many exams. And
I didn't take any.
you didn't take, but 11 plus you failed. Between the ages of 19 and 21, you travelled over Europe. And it was whilst in Bordeaux.
Sorry, what are those ages again?
Roughly between 19 and 21.
Yeah.
You travelled over the continent, and it was whilst in Bordeaux, France, that you met a 22-year-old Irish girl, Mary Holden, who you were to bring back to England in April '67 and marry in the following August at St Joseph's Catholic Church.
Only because she was pregnant.
Due to her pending
Pregnancy.
Were you evicted from that flat in Highgate that was above the Dolls?
Yeah.
You were evicted?
Yes, eventually. Yeah.
And that's when you took refuge in the cellar of a friend at 9 Priestwood Mansions, 294 Archway Road.
That's near enough accurate.
In the cold winter of 69-70. It was during those bleak months that the vampire phenomenon seemed to become or be made public.
Yeah.
You are on record in the Hampton Highgate Express as encountering a vampire inside the cemetery gates late at night on the way home, which you treated as a joke. Then it happened again whilst you was hurrying home to your cellar on a winter's night. And you remembered a similar incident when it taking place the year you got married. It says you became a little frightened at first, then more interested. This is what prompted you to write to your local paper, the Hampton Highgate Express, telling them what you had seen and asking for an explanation. Your letter, Ghostly Walks in Highgate, was followed by a deluge of letters from readers who also claimed to have witnessed a spook inside the gates of the cemetery. This led to an official investigation into the vampire. And you were subsequently visited in your cellar, which contained an old mattress and a few personal items from time to time. And your interest in the Highgate vampire seemed to grow. And you took it upon yourself to fulfill the ancient and approved method by which one might destroy the undead being. Is this so?
Yes.
Culminating on Friday, March 13th, 1970, when even warned publicly, both in the press and on the television, at 6:05 on a programme called Today, by the President of the British Occult Society, not to venture into the cemetery and stake the vampire. You still went ahead that same evening, as did many others who joined the mass vampire hunt in Highgate Cemetery. You remember that?
Alan Blood.
Alan Blood was the history teacher, was there, as were many cranks from all over the country with their homemade stakes, and many lookers-on, people who joined in. And what time was it? Would it be at midnight, wearing a cross and carrying a sharp stake, you entered the cemetery by climbing the wall?
I believe it was.
Earlier, Alan Blood had approached you to join forces with him in the Prince of Wales public house.
That's right.
And you turned him down.
Yeah.
And members of the occult society tried to get you to call it off, to quote the local newspaper, for your own safety, but you refused.
Many people were opposed to it, yeah.
Try again 5 months later, this time in secret. During the first week of August 1970, you felt the time had come for another attempt at the vampire. You were aware, were you, in that same month, of a group of members of the British Occult Society exercising a Highgate tomb after the discovery of a headless child body and signs of a satanic ceremony, reported on the back page of the Haunted Journal? You were aware of that?
I recall that report, yeah. I don't know when it was, though.
Well, it was at the time that you made your second attempt on the vampire.
Yeah.
It seems you'd also heard that Satanists were meeting in the cemetery at midnight. However, for reasons best known to yourself, you went over the cemetery wall behind St Michael's Church the following Monday, August the 17th, armed with a wooden stake and a large cross, on which was inscribed a pentagram this time. And you went alone and unaided. Correct. You felt certain this time that you would encounter the undead being and presumably destroy it.
That is...
This is the second attempt in August 1970, August the 17th.
Yes, except there were other people there, but the police didn't apprehend them.
What?
Yeah, on that second attempt.
On the second attempt, there are other people in the cemetery?
Yes.
But were they with you?
Yes.
What, they went with you?
No, they didn't go with me, but I met them in there.
Who was that?
There were about 3 other people in there.
Who were they?
I don't think you knew them at the time.
Well, they weren't newspaper men?
No.
As you crouched waiting for the supernatural being to emerge from its resting place, police searching for black magic devotees found you and arrested you. Is that correct?
Yeah.
You were then taken to the police station and questioned. First you said nothing, but then admitted that you intended to drive your wooden stake through the heart of the vampire. Detective Sergeant Neville Brown told you to plead guilty, and you'd be allowed to go the following day. However, following morning you appeared at Clerkenwell and pleaded guilty, but you were not let go, but remanded in custody for reports.
Yeah.
How is it that people who were with you were not also taken and similarly charged?
The police didn't get them when they came in. Remember, the police arrived in force. I think 2 cars came up, and they didn't arrive quietly. They shone great big flashlights.
But were the police aware that you were accompanied by anyone else?
I believe so.
But they didn't pursue?
They didn't really care the fact that they got me. They did in fact look, I think some of the police, they went after them and chased them to the cemetery. At
Brixton Prison, you received visits, one from a member of the British Occult Society, the other from and I quote, a Barnet Company director. You weren't, according to yourself, treated well in prison, both prisoners and staff making fun of you, and you were examined by 2 psychiatrists. One found you to be perfectly sane whilst the other had his reservations.
Correct.
It was whilst in jail that you changed your plea to not guilty, and the other visitor, that is to say not the Occult Society but the other visitor, stood bail for you.
Yeah, and there's one thing that's not quite accurate there. If you want to be accurate,
yeah.
I changed my plea immediately that I was remanded in custody. I actually did it in the cells.
In the cells, oh.
Because the police hadn't kept their part of the bargain.
Oh, I see.
They gave me the impression it would just be a fine and a warning.
The mysterious Barnet Company director had whisked you off from the prison gates in his car to a rented house on Manor Road in High Barnet, is that correct?
Yeah.
First, he wouldn't let you out of the house unless accompanied by himself. Then he let you leave in the morning to go to work as a Barnet General Hospital as a porter, so that you could pay him £3 a week board.
No, hang on a minute. Just let me think.
It's not terribly important.
No, I thought it isn't really important. I didn't find the job at Barnet General Hospital immediately. I took the job at Barnet, I think, mainly because of the sake of the court appearance.
Now, were you acting on your own, or with others, or were you're frequently described as a freelance vampire hunter at the time, ghost hunter and so forth? Were you in truth acting on your own, or were you acting with a group of others? These others that you mentioned were in the cemetery. I mean, were you part of another thing, or were you?
Yeah, on some occasions alone, on many occasions with others.
And who were the others? I mean, not what were their names, but who were they? I mean, were they acting in a freelance capacity as well, or were they?
No, people involved in the occult.
Were they witches?
Some were.
Were they black magicians?
Some were, but we didn't discover it. I wasn't aware at the time they were black magicians.
So you might have been in the company of Satanists without realising it yourself at the time. This is now, we're talking in terms of 1970.
Very possibly. Yes.
So, well, when did you learn that your accomplices on that and possibly other occasions might very possibly be Satanists?
Shortly after the time of the vampire ceremony.
What
the vampire escapade.
Which one?
The second one.
In August?
Yeah.
1970. And what happened upon receipt of that knowledge? Did you then cease to meet these people?
No, that wouldn't be quite true to say that.
See, at the time you were living in dire poverty and degradation, on a staple diet of cold fish and cups of tea, in a freezing cold cellar, often visited by mice and insects, on a very damp mattress. What we want to establish is, how did you become a man with a mission? At that time the mission was to locate the undead tomb. And what were you doing getting involved with Satanists?
Involved isn't quite the right word. I don't regard, to me, no, magic is not necessarily black.
Well, in that same month, that is the
You
month.
see, people that you might define as Satanists wouldn't be defined as Satanists by myself.
Would anyone be defined as a Satanist by yourself?
Yes, I would say there are some people very, very, very extreme. I suppose you could call them Satanists.